Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Lost LT's Razor. Today's guest needs very little introduction in the small unit tactics community or the Marine Corps as a whole. Blake Flannery, otherwise known as Blakewater0326 on Instagram, is a 20-year Marine Corps veteran, former Force Reconnaissance Marine. He's an instructor and the founder of Maneuver Training Solutions. Early in his career, he started out as a rifleman and a stay scout. Later, he was selected into First Force Recon Company, multiple deployments across Iraq, Europe, and the Pacific. Blake ended up retiring in 2021, and he ended up shifting his focus from leading Marines in combat and training to teaching others how to lead, think, and kind of train like them. So through Maneuver Training Solutions and his work with Orion Training Group, Blake continues to shape the next generation of warfighters, whether military or civilian alike, and Coast Guard as well. In today's episode, we talk about where rubber meets the road when it comes to doctrine and reality. We also focus on some foundational habits that small unit leaders should have. And then Blake provides us some good lessons learned for squad leaders, team leaders, platoon commanders, etc. Thank you again for listening and hope you enjoy.
I'm the old man.
And I'm Lost LT 1775, an infantry officer and captain in the Marine Corps. Welcome to Lost LT's Razor, where the fight, the leader, and the lessons learned all matter. Super excited to have him on the show today, and Blake, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Awesome. So one of the things that I would love to hear from you is really just to kind of use this unique lens that you have of over 20 years of experience in the Marine Corps to kind of explain to us in maybe one or two examples of this dichotomy between doctrine and reality. Something I focus heavily on this page is teaching doctrine and kind of taking complex things and breaking it down to make it simple for people to understand. But it's a valid question of where does the rubber meet the road when it comes to doctrine and reality? So I'd just love to hear some insights from you on what you think the gap is there and how we can address that.
Yeah, so I think the old cliche of be doctrinally sound and not doctrinally bound holds very true. You need to know your doctrine because that is the playbook off of which we operate. And if we all just make our own playbook, unit to unit, squad to squad, team to team, and everybody just gets to make up their own playbook however they wish, then we would not be able to actually operate in concert the way that we need to, create combined arms dilemma and all that. So it's important to know what the doctrine says, but then equally as important, you have to go out and train. You have to go out and try to put these things into practice and put them to the test as best you can in a training environment. And probably right up there with being, important. I don't want to list 1,000 things as being equally important, but right up there is knowing your history, actually knowing history. So you understand that where have these principles, where have these techniques and tactics been used in the past in varying situations, and how did it flush out? And when you look at that and you look at historical precedents, when you look at your own training, does something fail because adhering to doctrine doesn't work? Or does it fail because you don't understand the doctrine and or your TTPs well enough? And that is probably the hardest assessment any individual and small unit leader is going to make, because it's really, really easy to look at your teammates, to look at your squad leader, to look down at your fire team leaders, the platoon commander, and point the finger and blame it on somebody else. It's really, really hard to point the finger at yourself and not just for a mistake that you make as an individual, but if you are that team leader, squad leader, platoon sergeant, to point the finger at yourself when somebody else makes a mistake and be like, yeah, didn't set them up. We need to spend some more time on that. But I think probably the most prevalent example for me as a young Marine was the initial push across the line of departure into Iraq in 2003. And up to that point, we'd done a fair bit of mount training, which obviously includes a fair bit of CQB because you have to clear structures when you're fighting in a city. And we operated under this idea that every door, right, had to be covered. There had to be a gun on every door in order to have the necessary level of security in order to begin affecting entry into spaces. And when you're outside moving to the city, it's like, I don't know how we're accomplishing this, but we've got a platoon of guys moving down the street. So more or less we're accomplishing guns being pointed at all the windows and doors, as best we can. And then inside the structure, it was very regimented and almost robotic. And we get to our first objective, and I come around the corner, and I've told this story a couple of times before, but we come around the corner, and it's a large C-shaped building. It opens up to a courtyard, and all of the doors are off of this courtyard, not the external side of the building. So I have my fire team. I am a brand new corporal. I've got my 3 guys with me, and I see 30 doors in this courtyard. So I call for support. I'm hollering, thinking I need to get the whole platoon over here. So there's guns pointed at all these doors, and not even understanding how that would even be accomplished in the first place without guys just literally standing in front of a door, which now we know would be silly. And my squad leader comes over, seeing what's going on. I tell him what I've got, and he says, just figure it out, get it cleared. I'm like, okay. And we just start taking doors. And, I'm here thinking that I'm going to get blasted in the back as we're trying to work a door because there's all these other doors around us. And we never had to work a problem like that. No one had ever looked at our training as, it may not be we put an entire platoon into a building and they work down a hallway with a hall boss and everything has security on it. We might just have to send 1 or 2 fire teams to clear a structure because everyone else is also tasked with other things within the platoon sector. It was just a very regimented look at this is the only way this is going to go down. And we weren't prepared for that. And, figured it out, and it more or less worked out, I guess, because I'm still here to talk about it. But that was a wild experience where I started to realize that we had been operating off of some kind of doctrine or some SOP that someone had established and had not allowed the room for actually just understanding what has to happen, because ultimately doctrine is really going to be the principles and fundamentals of how we accomplish a thing. If we try to treat it as a playbook or read it as that strict, step-by-step process, we start to lose things because it doesn't get into that kind of minutia. From our doctrine then comes down to other publications and the SOPs, and then the training and enabling initiative. So without that clear understanding of the principles and fundamentals of what needs to happen and the ways I can make that happen as a fire team leader, it was just, taking it room by room and figuring out, but it didn't feel right. Felt very vulnerable. And that was kind of a continuing process through the rest of that deployment when it came time for room clearing. And the only thing we had to fall back on was exactly the training we had done, and none of that specific training really applied over to what we were looking at, on the battlefield. And because we had been so strict with we must follow this doctrine, there was a lot of uncertainty and just kind of figuring it out in the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting. As you're saying that, we're so focused on teaching, at least at a schoolhouse where I'm at right now. I'm so focused on teaching there are 10 steps of this thing, write them down, commit them to memory, and then I'm going to go evaluate you and watch you do those 10 steps in order. But like, that's in somewhat of a controlled environment. And as soon as you get punched in the face from the enemy, or you're presented with conditions that you didn't plan for, that you weren't exposed to, I mean, truly, I think to the story that you just told, that's kind of where your ability to be adaptable and just kind of flex based on the conditions around you is crucial. So I think it's reinforcing to hear you say, hey, don't throw away doctrine entirely and just go kind of gung-ho and do it. But I think that it's a super interesting balance of like, it'll take you probably, I don't know, 60, 70, 80% of the way there, but you still need to remain adaptable to close that last gap, because there's only so much we can learn from history, and we can learn a ton from history and those that came before us, but you've just got to be adaptable at the end of the day. So I love that.
Yeah. And I mean, you still see it now, so one of the other things that I do is I work with the Coast Guard, teaching some of their specialized guys, and basically what I work is very, very heavy CQB focused, and you'll see it, both in the entry level training course, and then they come back through some supervisory level skills, and especially when it's CQB, somewhat in the marksmanship side, but especially in the tactics side, they use us instructors to act as like trainees, and then the actual student is a Coast Guardsman who's there to evaluate us, and they'll get us to a point where it's like, okay, the house is laid out. You guys are just, as a 4-man team, you're going to move through the structure and clear it, and then they're going to debrief you. And, there could be me, and I'm a retired, recon Marine. My other partner could be another retired recondo. It could be a retired SF guy or a retired Raider. And then I'm going to have, a tactical law enforcement guy from the Coast Guard and an MSRT guy. And none of us have been on a team before with each other. Most of us probably haven't even been in the house with each other before. So we have to figure it out. And if there's the commonalities that we share with the understanding of what is the doctrine, for the Coast Guard. But then when myself and whoever, the other retired Marine or SF guy that's there with me, and we just start solving problems based on the tactics, techniques that we know, and it's outside the written, this is the only way to do it in the U.S. Coast Guard, the student instructors start getting overwhelmed because, we're doing things quote unquote wrong. And then after the run, we have like, well, no, that wasn't wrong. You want us to do it this way because that's what your document says is the way to do it. But the reality, if we just look at this thing objectively, did we satisfy the principles of CQB? Did we accomplish the fundamentals? Did we follow our priorities of work, within processing of space? And if the answers to those questions are yes, then instead of saying it was wrong, can we look at, was it efficient, or was there a more efficient way that we could have gone? It's still always there, that kind of people get a little too bound to it because it's like all they know, and we tend to believe that, well, this is the way I was trained, so this should be it. Yeah. When it's very likely, there's another answer.
There's got to be, and just because it's unfamiliar doesn't mean it's wrong. That's a pretty closed-minded approach for sure. I think one of the things that I see a lot with junior lieutenants, or really just talking to Marines in general, and I've been trying to put a lot of information out about it, even though there isn't a lot of doctrine on like unmanned systems and small UAS and kind of teaching that. And as I look through it, I'd love to get your opinion on the balance of CQB and teaching that to conventional infantry, not recon or MARSOC community here, but conventional infantry. There's this tendency for everyone to really want to fall in love and get into CQB as a junior platoon commander, and I'd love some pushback if you don't agree with this, but my argument back to them is, hey, like, your bid to success is combined arms, right? As a conventional infantry platoon, you need to know how to incorporate combined arms and like be capable of leveling that town in the event that's what we need you to do. You should still be familiar with CQB and like train to be good at that, right? Because that's still something we can't let go. But like, I really need you to focus your time and energy in this area. As now unmanned systems kind of come into the fold, I'm curious if there's any training either in or out of the Marine Corps. I mean, you've been out since 2021 now, right? So is there any difference that you see when it comes to the fundamentals of teaching people how to go in an urban environment and clear buildings and rooms for the first time, as there's now the kind of this outlier, this new capability or technology that we're seeing?
No, there's nothing change about the principles and the fundamentals. You take something like drones in any form. Is it, an aerial vehicle? Is it a ground vehicle? And that's another tool that we can utilize to accomplish the goal, still going off of, the principles and the fundamentals. So something I've done a few times is, showing police departments, hey, look, here's this little throwable, drivable robot. So you throw it in because you guys are executing a warrant, and there's no, the colloquialism we'll say is like, there's no need to rush to your death. There's no need for you to just start charging into every space as fast as you can, not knowing where these bad guys are. So you can, throw the drone ahead of you. Something similar used to be done here and there with working dogs, but the robot doesn't turn around and bite you by accident.
Right.
So that's where the robot's pretty nice. But you throw the robot in, and you gain your foothold, and the robot, let's say, goes through the first door into the hallway. It does a left and a right. It doesn't see anybody in the hallway. You're like, okay, cool. It goes to the first open door, and it goes in the doorway, and it does, a 180 scan in the room. The operator is like, I see nothing. So he moves the robot out, starts going to the next door. Boom, you dump a fire team, or, in some of these cases, like they just dump a pair, and they sprint down to that room, and they make entry to, clear all the little nooks and crannies and dead space inside that room that the robot couldn't see. And, the next fire team or the next two are on deck to then move down and check the next room behind that. And then you can start sending guys to go hit the closed doors. Now we don't have any eyes in on those closed doors. And you can ask yourself the question, like, do we just clear those rooms? Do we want to just pop the door and get the robot back in there? Those are things that you work, and there's a lot of MET-TC in there to order to be able to actually answer that question. And that's also important to understand. Again, going back to sound versus bound, like, if we have that SUAS, it doesn't mean that no matter what, the little robot, in whatever form it takes, is going to precede the human being. Because there are going to be times where that human being needs to get ahead, and we have to be moving faster than what the robot can do for us. But yeah, by all means, like, we can't get tunneled into it. But one of the things I also say to guys is, we always look at, we say CQB, we automatically go to this, thought of clearing structures and fighting down hallways and fighting room to room. But it's just a description of proximity. If I hop into somebody's trench or fighting hole, I'm in CQB. If I am in the jungle and I encounter a near ambush, I am in CQB. If I am out in the street and the building across the street starts shooting at me, I am in CQB. If I'm in 100 meters, by doctrine, that is close. So it's not just I'm clearing a room. I am in a close fight. And that's where a lot of these principles become incredibly important, because that fight is now so close. You have to be fast, right? We have the speed, surprise, violence of action. We have to have a level of security at all times. And it's not a common thing, but it's something that we teach it through Orion Training Group. And I do and don't agree with that. I don't like saying be safe. I think being safe actually breeds the wrong kind of mindset, and I prefer to say be smart. That notwithstanding, and not going to that tangent, thinking of safety as a principle to achieve, as in not biting off more than we can chew, and then making sure we're leveraging all of our assets. So, is this something that I should just tell the fire team to go run across the street and make entry in that structure? Or should I be putting out smoke? Should I be putting suppressive fires on that building? Should I put the drone ahead of them before I just send this fire team into the building? I need to do that kind of quick, on the spot risk management of, should I even be employing troops? And we also all know the old colloquialism, never put a ring where you can put a bullet, never put a bullet where you can put a bomb. And ultimately, that's one of the bigger, I don't really want to say differences, but one of the differences between, if you're going to employ an infantry platoon versus a recon platoon on a target, if you're employing a recon platoon, you are doing so because you are trying to limit collateral damage, and this is a target in a more sensitive environment where that's really much more important. Whereas the infantry platoon, you are employing them because you just need it gone. We used to say that the grunts are the sledge, and in Force Recon, we're supposed to be the scalpel. But what we do, there's not a different way I walk through a door and clear my corner compared to how I did it as an 0311. Save some efficiencies in movement and some, I was more capable with a gun by that time.
Right.
But that's just a training thing. It's still the same process. It's the same principles. It's the same fundamentals. So it's all very relevant to teach everyone, and I do think it's very important because it is such a dangerous fight to get into.
Yeah.
I do believe it's very important to get trained in, but you're right. If we get too focused on any one thing, what are we losing? If we spend 6 weeks doing CQB training, what's falling to the wayside? Because it's going to be something, and that was something I really experienced in force. Because hey, we're recon Marines, so we started our workup, and it's we got to be doing a lot of reconnaissance patrols and working all the skills associated with being able to go out in the field and do amphibious and deep reconnaissance missions. And then we started doing all of our raids and CQB training. It's we haven't done a patrol in a few months. I don't know if we're going to be able to quite accomplish it as we could. And then you get back into that, and it's oh man, we haven't been to the range in 2 months. That's probably a skill we should sustain some more. And then you find yourself kind of bouncing around. And you guys said it, you and Ty, in the Aura Ambush episode, jack of all trades, master of none. So you have to have the skills.
Yeah.
But you don't want to find yourself a mile wide and an inch deep. You have to find that balance. And so when it comes to being in the infantry, yeah, we want to train it a lot so we can ensure that our guys are really, really proficient, because that increases their survivability and increases their lethality. Because if I'm really good, then I'm going to kill the bad guy before he kills me, which is kind of the whole point of, us going into war.
Yeah.
But if I just do that, I might lose out on something else. If I just do that, are the boys going to get too singularly focused and forget, what else to do? Great example is running an exercise and here comes the assault element moving to breach. They're moving past this building. For anyone who's familiar listening in at Camp Davis South, you have those little container buildings with very large windows. And we had a good number of those windows already open. And the assault element just charged straight past all the windows, and they ran around to the breach, and they put up their charge. They initiated the breach, and then they ran inside, and it was like a quick little paintball war, between the assault element and the role players inside. And the debrief after the fact is like, well, why didn't you guys shoot them through the windows? And they're like, well, you never taught us to do that. I'm like, I never taught you to engage targets. Jeez. I never taught you that you could engage a target through some kind of threshold, whether it be a door or a window or a hole in the wall. And they kind of looked at me and I'm like, how is a doorway any different to a window? It's an opening through the wall. So not only did you bypass it and not have security, that's violating a principle, but you could have shot the role players instead of having to go into their domain by entering their structure. You could have shot them from outside, and that would have saved you a lot of heartache. And they're like, oh,
it's funny you say that.
Could have done that.
I see a lot of similarity in I think the way I'd sum it up is like, I make an assumption that everyone thinks with, I think there's a common level of common sense, but at the same time, for some people, if this is their first time ever practicing or training in a CQB type scenario, like, I think that the idea of you don't know what you don't know applies. But something as obvious as that, you would think, hey, if there's a window, I'm going to go ahead and engage an enemy through that window, as opposed to going into a room and clearing. It's what you would think is common sense is not always common sense, I suppose. But
and it was that singular focus of like, oh, we're the breach team. We got to get up there and get that charge on the door. Like, it's go time.
Yep.
And we want to blow that door in, and this is going to be awesome. Well, it's like, I would have still let you blow up the door if you shot the role players through the windows, because you still got to get through it.
Yeah, you
that's why you got to expand it. Yeah. And you're right with the combined arms. That is the key, because I don't always want to go through the door, and having somebody put a hole in the wall, from a good distance out, that's always fun.
100%.
And I can do that. And again, it's a really, really dangerous fight, so I want to be really good at it. But no matter how good I am, if I have the option to just kind of walk up and clean up the mess from some mortars and some heavy machine gun fire and some 40 mic, that would be more optimal for me.
That's always
it may not be like as cool of a story. It may not make for cool videos like the that recent one that just got put out, and bringing back the dead checks. Gotta love it. But it's way safer to do it that way, and that goes back into that idea of that principle. CQB is like my current, it's a lot of what I do.
Yeah.
It's that and shooting. So obviously that's my biggest frame of reference with a lot of this stuff, but it doesn't apply to just CQB.
Yeah.
We have to understand the principles and the fundamentals that Doctrine is telling us will work, and go put it to the test.
Yeah.
Make sure that we're still adaptable and enabling that initiative within our people, so they will just apply whatever technique or procedure they think best fits that situation.
Yeah.
And we have at it.
Yeah, and I think not being so caged and focused on here is one response or even two responses or whatever. Like, you can give a list of a few common reactions to an event, but at the end of the day, it all comes back to your mindset and just being flexible and adaptable in general to find a way to win. It doesn't matter what the conditions are around you. I think with your experience of 20 years wearing the uniform plus another, let's call it 4 or 5 outside of this very, like, now being full-time for you as an instructor, what are some common shortfalls or gaps or really areas that people are messing up when it comes to, I mean, it could be anything here, CQB or just anything else that you've seen, both in and out of uniform. Are there any similarities or things that come to mind when you think shortfalls?
Yeah, one of the biggest things is people worried about appearance. There are, I see it because I train, not just military and law enforcement, but a lot of the training has civilians. And so you will get guys who will show up and they have bought all the cool guy gear that they see on social media, and they have, expensive guns with all these attachments on them, or attachments for the sake of having attachments to try to make it look cooler. And they just want to go 1,000 miles an hour, everything they do, but they don't even know what to do. And it's like, all right, take a step back, like, go put all of your equipment down. I just need you to walk from this side of the door to that side of the door without running into the wall and seeing what's in front of you, like actually seeing what's in front of you. That's what I need you to do right now.
Right.
And then you have it to where that's like the very kind of selfish appearance. And then I see it a lot with law enforcement, to where their command is very concerned about how they appear to the public. And so they won't use night vision because they don't want to appear, that scary to the public. And they won't use flashbangs because they're worried of the appearance of what happens if, someone is injured within the use of a flashbang. And there's definitely some legitimate concerns within those quandaries. But at the same time, when it comes to, you don't want to seem too militaristic. Like, well, why are people not like that?
Right.
Well, because they're intimidated by the way that you look. Like, well, who else is intimidated by the way you look? The people that are actually breaking the law that you're going after.
Yeah.
So that's good. I know there's some other reasons that people don't like the, when cops wear camouflage and stuff like that. And I get those concerns too, but there's a lot of that very, very concerned about appearance and not concerned about function.
Yeah.
That's really the biggest thing I would say is like an overarching, whether it's a very small level of somebody just has like all of the attachments that they can possibly put on their rifle or their gear, or they're wearing, that's always great, is all like the t-shirt drops and hat drops and hoodie drops and guys are always wearing those, and the stickers and the patches on their kit, to kind of a more serious look at how SWAT guys don't always have all of the tools that you would want to have in that environment, because the command is afraid of how it might look if they wear a thing or use a thing and someone's injured in the process. So there's that. And then from there, it goes back to what we already kind of talked about, of people know a way and they make the mistake of thinking that's the only way. We have taught, a manual breaching class a couple of times. And one of the first times I taught it, I was working with a couple of guys who were breachers on their SWAT team. And I talked about, disbursement of tools so that when you're inside the target, within, your little 4-man team or even down to a 2-man team, you should have a tool to effect entry if you encounter a locked door. And they were like, we've never thought about that. We breach the exterior door and then we clear targets. He said, we actually haven't encountered a locked door inside any of the targets. I'm like, oh, well, that's great. So, that may mean, depending on, for you, the size of target that you guys typically encounter, that maybe it's not necessary to have, a Halligan and a sledge in every 4-man team. but you definitely need to understand where your primary tools are at. So if you do encounter that locked door, what are your procedures? Are you going to continue clearing the structure and then get the tools up to there and then clear that one last? Are you going to wait till the tools get there, then clear that one and go in? Are you going to make that call on the fly? Like, those are decisions that you guys have to make. And then, another group of guys are like, we actually encounter locked doors all the time, and we're always trying to bring tools up from the main breach. None of us had ever considered if we all just had tools on us already and everyone is a breacher. I'm like, yeah, that speeds things along quite nicely. And then people ask me, well, how would you do this in Force Recon? I was like, well, in Force Recon, I had a shite load of explosives. Yeah. So, I've got, like, every guy has interior door charges. There's, 1 or 2 shotguns per team. There's tools all over the place. I've got charges for the walls outside. I've got charges for doors and windows inside, outside. I've got guys with weapons outside that could put holes in the wall for me if I need it. Like, I have a lot of tools. You don't have that. So let's look at what tools you do have available, and we'll go back to the principles and how are we going to solve this problem. Yeah. And go, like, hey, can you shoot them through a friggin' window instead of going inside the house? So yeah, that's the biggest things I see with mistakes is the appearance, and then being kind of too doctrinally bound of this is the one way I know it. This is the one way I've been told to do it. And I have never questioned it. I have never wanted to actually pressure test it. I'm just going to keep doing it that way.
Yeah. I think there's got to be somewhat of a balance of, I don't want the listener to think we don't want you to look cool at the same time, but if you don't,
rule number one.
Yeah, right. I mean, it is rule number 1 of recon, right? If you got to look cool, but if you don't know your job and you look like an idiot while you're doing it, then you're not achieving that thing. So you could buy the coolest gear, but if you don't know what you're doing, you're missing the point.
Yeah, you could have all the Gucci gear, but you don't even know how to wear your gear. You don't know how to do your job. You do not look cool. Yeah, you actually look more foolish.
Yep. And if you're an officer listening to this, then all your Marines are going to make a lot more fun of you as well. So just get used to that. What kind of shifting gears a little bit? I think you've kind of explained maybe 1 or 2 of them, but if you could try to give somewhat of a consolidated list, essentially, of core habits, and really what I would call maybe foundational habits that every small unit leader, talking to the active duty service members here, like before they start to worry about the Gucci gear, the advanced tactics, TTP, stuff like that, like what foundational habits should they lock in and focus time and energy on to get right now?
So brilliance in the basics, knowing your job, whatever that is, all those little things like you learn in MOS school, and all those little things that your NCOs are going to teach you when you get to your unit. Those are really, really important to know. Because no matter what, you can accomplish the mission as long as you have a baseline, toolbox of, do I have a rifle? Do I have magazines? Do I have some way of conveniently carrying those? But I understand how to do the job I'm being tasked to do. And then I understand the actual job itself. Like, I understand what I was told to do and the intent behind it. Like those basic comprehension skills of actually listening to what is going on. And then like, okay, so I understand what I need to do, how I'm thought to do it. And I have the basic tools I need to go do that. And I know how to use those tools. I know how to apply all the little things I'm supposed to do along the way. Because if you can't get yourself to the party, then you're not going to be able to party.
Yeah.
That's good. All that's really, really important.
Yeah. And again, things that seem common sense, but if no one's looked you in the eyeballs and told you that before, it's incredible advice. Yeah. I think yes, go ahead.
I was going to say it's frustrating because I know that's kind of what started me is, being a young 0311, and I didn't feel like we were doing the training that we needed to do. And I didn't think we were spending enough time on the range, or we weren't doing enough CQB, and we weren't doing enough this and that. And I was like, I can hike forever in a mop suit. Like, that's super cool, but
check.
I don't know if I can, actually engage targets beyond 300 meters reliably, with my rifle. I don't know if I can actually clear rooms. I've only thrown a couple of frag grenades since SOI. Like, I don't know if I can actually do all this stuff. And the one thing I could control, though, was my gear. And so I started looking at gear and going out in town, and it started with a 3-point sling when those were still a thing. Mm-hmm. And then I had, a rifle magazine drop leg, and then I found a 40 millimeter drop leg, and, people started making molly pouches in the open markets. I started adding pouches to my kit, and then I bought this and I bought that. And it took me some years to realize that, like, it doesn't matter how much kit, it doesn't make me better. I actually have to be better for this kit to actually matter.
Yeah. It's interesting that you were just talking about, training so much. And I think a lot of it maybe is out of our control. At a certain level, we're going to do the training that higher kind of dictates for us. But I, too, have a distinct memory thinking to my last deployment. I mean, how many times did we do, for a MEU workup, you do an amphibious raid or assault? And I just remember laughing with a few buddies or Marines of like, or overhearing the conversations of, when are we going to go to an amphibious assault? We're all looking at the headlines and thinking a non-combatant evacuation operation is probably the most likely thing for us, depending on like the MEUs of the last few years at that point. And so it was just that it was an interesting conversation that we're like, maybe we should do a little bit more of this type training instead of full scale amphibious assaults. So it was just an interesting, but at the same time, you can still control a good amount of, if that's a thing that you're worried about and you want to lean into, okay, go read a book or pick it up and have a conversation with your squad, your platoon, et cetera, to figure it out. You can still lean into it and bring those things up. But I just remember laughing about that. I think for those that aren't super familiar with the Force Recon community, can you kind of bridge the gap for the conventional infantry on, I would sum it up as like, what things do you remember that sit with you from the Force Recon community about whether it's like discipline or repetition? You mentioned humility a handful of times. Are there any things or nuanced differences between the Force Recon community that are worth conveying and communicating to the conventional infantry, or things that most Marines maybe overlook?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm going to say this, and I don't say this to be demeaning to, the guys in the rifle platoons or anything like that, but I started out that way, and I joined the Marine Corps to go into Force Recon, and that wasn't something you could do entry level. And even now, if you have a recon contract, there's, not a great chance, depending on the command climate, that you're going to go straight to the force company. You usually have to do your time in one of the line companies before you get to force. Mm-hmm. And I found that not everyone in my platoon and, the company was quite as committed to the mission, as it were. And the easiest way is like all the guys were, every morning they wake up and they go in formation and they say, I can't wait to get out. And then you hear them at lunch and I can't wait to get out. And you hear them at evening formation, I can't wait to get out. It's like, dude, we've been in the fleet for 3 months. You've got like 3.5 years left on your contract. You might want to have a different focus, because that's not coming anytime soon. And it was rough. And then there were a couple of guys that were like really about it. And, obviously like we banded together, and then you get mocked because, you're the motard and you like this too much, and you spend your free time, pouring through publications and sharpening your knives and spit shining your door. I don't know what spit shines are gross anymore, so scratch that one. Dating myself.
Yeah, right.
And so I came back and so, we came back from our first deployment, and I had an opportunity to go out for the state platoon, and I did. And I thought like, okay, this is like a more volunteer thing. And I thought I would find a lot more like-minded people, and I kind of did, but then I didn't, and it was really disappointing. So I was actually going to get out of the Marines, and I was going to go see if the grass was greener on the other side with going 18 X-ray to the Special Forces program.
Yeah.
And then an opportunity came up to be able to go take the indoc for Force, and so I did. And I'm in this and going through our indoctrination program for 6 months, but all these other guys, like, they all wanted to be there. We all wanted to do, the things that we knew and thought we were going to do as Force Recon. And then being in that very first platoon, and this is something that sustained, is like everybody that's there truly wants to be there. That's the biggest thing. Mm-hmm. Everyone wants to be there, right? They had to volunteer to join the Marines. They had to volunteer to be in the infantry OC field, and then they had to volunteer again to go into recon. And they had to volunteer, whether they knew it, the scale of it or not, to be assessed and selected that many times, right? You got boot camp, you got your SOI, and then you have to go through a basic recon course. So you have done a lot and to get to that point. So you're with a bunch of guys who really want to be there. Everybody wants to be really good at their job. Some of it's just ego, right? Everyone wants to be really good at their job so that, they're more liked than the next guy, and but everybody wants to be good. Everybody wants to be there. And then you start seeing there is a breakdown for sure of some guys who are just there to wear the t-shirt, but they are very quickly, cut off to the side. And you will see teams that are under TO, and it's not because there aren't enough 0321s to form up that platoon. It's because they happen to have a guy that was found wanting, and they would rather go on patrol, they'd rather go on that raid, they'd rather do whatever the job is without that guy, because he's just not up to the standard. Now, we can't get rid of people like the way the Rangers can, but we can just straight up just leave you behind.
Yeah.
Like, you're staying on ship, you're going to be in the LFOC, man in the radio, you're going to be on ship tax, or you're just going to be in the berthing. Like, we're just going to leave you behind because you're not holding the standard.
Yeah.
And I think that's something to look at, that notion of, I'm going to paraphrase, and I forget the man's name, but I'd rather go up the river with 10 studs than 100 shitheads.
Yeah. See, yes. Yep.
I mean, that holds true no matter what. And then I will just, as kind of a cautionary tale, go back to, if you are the fire team leader, the squad leader, the platoon sergeant, platoon commander, it is your charge to get everyone up to standard. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't get to just leave guys behind, like, oh, you're just not good enough, we're just gonna, leave you in the rear. Like, we want and need every gun we can get.
Yeah.
We need every ounce of sustainment that can be carried. So we need everybody. So you gotta find that avenue to get everybody up to standard. And then once they've hit the standard, then they need another goal. They need another goal, whether that's, they're going to do their box drill faster, they're going to do their 3 mile quicker, they're going to get one more pull up on the next PFT. Like, give goals, set another standard, and allow guys to keep excelling above and beyond that minimum standard.
I think that's incredible advice. My next question for you was literally until you answered it, but it was hey, if you had a week with a rifle platoon, what would you do to help them build habits? I think that is just, you summed it up perfectly before I even had a chance to ask it, right? Like, I don't care if you're a team leader, squad leader, platoon commander, setting goals, that's such good advice and so simple and something that you can start doing right now. I think that's I mean, I can see that being beneficial for so many reasons. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I love my fellow Recondos, but my last 4 years at Special Tactics Branch out here at Camp Lejeune, and I would teach the recon company, and I had a great time teaching my brothers. But my favorite guys to teach were the security platoon, because those guys would show up and be like, "All right, guys, you got bad news. All right, I've only got it's like 10,000 rounds this week." And they're all kind of like, "Oh, that still seems a lot." I'm like, "For each of you." And they're like, "Holy shit." And then going out to the range, and I found that to be a really, really good avenue for me, to get into their heads and to influence the young guys, to influence the leadership, by creating good habits of, a simple vehicle as, how do you load your rifle? How are you going to wear your equipment? Because these are all small little things that you can control and you can improve. No matter what's going on, you can always be making better. Even if you're hurry up and waiting, there are avenues to keep working on these little things and hold yourself to standard, and you hold your buddies to standard. Because you're a PFC, you don't get to lead. If your buddies see you dry practicing and then you outwork them on the range, and now you look really cool and they look stupid, they're going to start practicing too. And then the more humble ones, who are the ones you want to associate with, are going to come to you like, "Hey, dude, how did you do that?" And now all of a sudden, you are, leading your other PFCs and Lance Corporals.
Yeah. And
more than likely, the way things roll in the Marine Corps, as a Lance Corporal, you could probably find yourself as a squad leader. I know it happened a lot when I was, a little boot, and I'm sure it still happens now.
100%. I mean, if you're hungry for it, and you're like, I think billet over rank is a conversation that's been brought up a handful of times. I remember at my last unit. I mean, if there's an individual that straight up is better suited to lead that squad or that team, I mean, it's a conversation with your commander and staff and COs, et cetera, but it's absolutely a possibility. If you're hungry and you want it bad enough and you're setting the standard, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah. We found ourselves in a weird spot where, I mean, when I first got to the fleet, we had one sergeant in the company. There were staff sergeants for the platoons, but there was one sergeant. Mm-hmm. So all the squad leaders were Lance Corporals and Corporals. All the fire team, I was a fire team leader as a PFC. And not because I was any good. I had zero time in the fleet, but I had spent more time reading the 6-5 than my peers. And so I could answer those doctrinal questions about, the effective ranges of weapon systems and things like that. I didn't know how to put it all into practice. And I certainly did not know how to actually be a fire team leader. And those are some of my struggles, but those opportunities present themselves. And I think it's important that, everyone's able to do that and mentored to do that. And it's just small things that you can do to set the example to your peers and control the things that you can absolutely control and be ready for when there's other things come around that you don't necessarily have control over, but you want to be able to excel at.
Yeah. No, 100%. I think, I mean, the humility aspect, setting goals as an individual and having somewhat of foresight to look forward and lean into the things that your analogy of using dry fire over and over and then performing at a live fire range, I think is incredibly valid because even something as like units establishing a warfighting society. That I remember hearing. I mean, when the warfighting society started up, people are like, "Oh no, that's not cool. Like, you guys are nerds. Like, no one's going to come talk about tactics and stuff. Like, that's ridiculous."
Dude, I wanted to go to that.
I know, right?
That looks super cool.
100%. I mean, that's the kind of culture that needs to be encouraged. And if it's not open and encouraged from higher in whatever capacity that means, like it's not going to grab hold and stay alive very long. And especially if you're telling your boys you think it's dumb, like, come on, man. I mean, that's just how are you going to be steward of the profession of arms if you can't sit down and have a serious conversation of looking at our own weaknesses and gaps and finding ways to improve, or looking at new technology, new TTPs, whatever the case is, and just leaning into it. I think you summing it up with controlling what you can control, and just being hungry is hit the nail right on the head. I wish I would have asked you more questions about deployment experiences and kind of lessons learned as you think back to your 20 years. Are there any additional ones? And you shared one at the beginning, but are there any lessons for the squad leaders or platoon commanders, that kind of tactical level audience, of anything that you can think back from on any of your deployments that jump out to you, and lessons that you would like to share that would maybe set them up for success before they have to learn it the hard way?
Yeah, we've already kind of touched on it, so I'm just going to emphasize you need to enable the Marines in your charge to take initiative. And if you ever utter the phrase, good initiative, bad judgment, haze yourself. If someone makes a decision because you have given them the authority to make those level decisions, but it wasn't the right decision, then you need to explain to them and show them why that was not the right way, or why it was maybe not the most efficient way. Why was that not the SOP? Because this stuff is not rocket science. And so that 18-year-old PFC is going to be presented with something, and he's going to make a decision. And it may ensue in hilarity when he throws the blue body up the stairs and it comes back at him and the fuse pops off at his feet and he looks at you like deer in the headlights. It's like, okay, well, exploit the HE, up the stairs you go. And he's going to get lit up by some munitions, and then he has learned his lesson. He looks stupid because a blue body went off at his feet. He got shot up by some munitions at the top of the stairs, but we took the second floor, and we're going to have a conversation. And you're going to break his balls about it, and he's not going to do it again. But you're also going to show him the right way. And if you need to, right, as a fire team, as a squad, let's do some remedial training on that. So that way we can make sure, because if that PFC did it, there's probably another one that's also going to do it, unless we emphasize why we don't do it that way.
Yeah.
And it's tough because everybody is worried about, the shit rolling downhill, but you have to be there to stop it and enable them to take initiative. Delegate your authority as a leader to your unit. You're a fire team leader, then everybody in your fire team should feel that they have the authority to make the decisions in the field as if they were you. They don't get to control the team. They understand that you are the fire team leader and you are in control of the team. But if they are waiting for you to specifically tell them what to do, then we're always going to be behind the curve, and the bad guy will have the momentum. And the only way to gain and maintain that momentum is to enable them to take initiative and to encourage it, to foster it, and just watch dudes go off.
That's awesome. That I'm over here taking notes as you're talking, and you got me fired up to go fucking bayonet the enemy right now. So thank you for that.
Do something right
now. Blake, I think you offered a dozen incredible tools and tips for the small unit leader. Thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing a glimpse into the long litany of lessons that you've learned over your career. I think you have this rare mix of combat credibility, essentially, of 20 years of service, but also taking it a step further on the outside world and having instruction and teaching and kind of tying the two worlds together from service in uniform and service out, or like in the civilian sector, essentially. So I think it's super unique, and obviously we've known each other now for a few years, and I continue to look up to you and learn a ton from you. So I hope that our listeners today were able to grab a few tools and tips and tricks from you. So thank you again for coming on the show today, and I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I love the opportunity to talk about this stuff.
In addition to his Instagram, he also runs Maneuver Training Solutions online. We'll also have that linked in the show notes. To the squad leaders, instructors, future officers, wherever you are right now, remember that leadership starts in the small things. Repetition, fundamentals, and the basics. The relationships with your peers and your Marines are incredibly important, and you need to cultivate them, and you cannot overlook the importance of being a good dude and also being good at your job.
Folks, you've been listening to Lost LT's Razor. Join us again next week for another episode on wherever you get your podcasts. So until next time, Semper Fi.
All right.